Gunfire Reborn. It's a game that came into early access back in 2020 during lockdown, and oh boy, did it come out at the best time for me. Unfortunately, at the time, we were all stuck in lockdown, something I'm sure we can all attest to at some point during the last 3 years, which is insane to think it's only been 3 years, and to also say it's been 3 bloody years. But the game came out, it was in early access. The game only had a couple of heroes, there wasn't too much to it, just the base of the game and the game design and the mechanics that were all there. It was brilliant. It was basically someone took the best parts of every roguelike ever. So you get something like Binding of Isaac or just any decent roguelike, and then you mash that up with the looter shooter fun of something like Borderlands, and here you have Gunfire Reborn. And now here we are, 3 years on at this point, I would say. I think it might actually be 3 years on, not from its original release, not from its full release, but from its early access release. And now we have so many new characters to enjoy. So first up, we got the OG, we got the Crown Prince. He's the character everyone starts with, he's the character you're most likely going to get used to. Alongside that, we got Ao Bai. He's basically the gunslinger from Borderlands 2. Then I believe we got Qing Yan, if I'm saying that correctly. He's the melee guy. We needed a melee character. We've got one. Then we've got Lei Lu, who essentially is just really strong and lightning strikes everything. Tao, who is OP. Tao is the only character I think I've beaten this game with consistently. If I want to win the game, I play Tao. She's brilliant. Quinn Sui, who I'll be honest, I've not played much of. He's a turtle. He's cool. Then we've got Monkey Dude. Again, I've not played much of him. That's on me. Sorry, Jing Shi. The previous DLC came with Jing Shi and Li, and then the latest DLC comes with Zi Xiao and Nona. With the last 2 DLCs, you get 4 different characters, but without it, you still have a good selection of characters to choose from. But we're not talking about that today. We're talking about the latest DLC characters. And one of them does some weird stuff with cards, and the other one is literally Ashe from Overwatch, where she just screams Bob do something, and then Bob just appears out of nowhere and just murders everything in sight. With Gunfire Reborn, every update adds something new. So with this latest DLC, there's more weapons, there's more scrolls, there's obviously the 2 new characters. There's also the new game mode, but I'm not sure if that was part of this DLC or not. But Gunfire Reborn constantly being updated into a better game, and it is quite frankly one of, if not my favorite indie game of all time. There's just so much enjoyment to be had. The gameplay is so unbelievably satisfying to play. All of the characters are unique in their own variety. They all have different builds and loadouts to pick and choose from. They have different skills you can play and focus on. Like for instance, this bloke here, we got the Crown Prince. How do you build him? That's up to you. How I build him typically is I chain everybody together, they get stuck forever, and he gets as many ones as he can do. The dude is fantastic. But the Crown Prince plays completely differently to someone like Ao Bai, who literally just turns into the Gunzerker from Borderlands 2 and just shoots guns in both hands. He is his own special creature. Every character is completely unique in their own way. My personal favorite, I'll be honest, really like Qing Yan, and Tao is also insanely good, but I think that's just because her royal flying swords are absolutely insane. But the game just has so much to offer. And I know when the game first came out, people were like, oh my god, it's Borderlands if they made it a roguelike. And yes, that is pretty much an accurate assumption of the game. But you don't really see people talking about it anymore, which sucks because, I'll be honest, this game is phenomenal. Allow me to just show you how much they've done. So, in total, there is 58 different weapons in the game. And they all relatively follow the sort of pistol, sniper archetype for the most part, but then you'll have stuff like the Cloud Weaver, which is literally Yondu's whistle spike from Guardians of the Galaxy. You've got the Bone Dragon, which is pretty much Zarya's black hole gun. You've got Fire Dragon, which is self-explanatory. It's a dragon that spits fire but can also spit grenades. You have bows, you have snipers, You have a literal brick. They added a brick to the game. You have a submachine gun that when you reload will be tossed and exploded. They've recently added the star ring, which the best way I can describe it is essentially what it would be like if Doctor Strange had his own weird time ring or whatever the bloody hell it's called. Where, you know, whenever he casts his, like, summoning circle or whatever and it just appears around him, that's literally what the star ring is. It's very satisfying to do. There's so many different weapons. And then we have occult scrolls. We have 179 of the bad boys. Depending on which ones you get, they completely change how you play the game. There's even a daily challenge. There's also spiritual assault, which I'm not 100% sure on how that works because I've not tried it. But the game is just absolutely dripping with content. They already gave you a bunch of stuff to enjoy in the game to begin with. And then over the span of a couple of years, they added loads of new weapons. They added a couple of new characters. And they've just kept working on the game from there. And then they added DLC that costed, what, I think it was less than £5 for 2 new characters, more weapons and everything else. And they've done it again. And the great part is currently it's like 10% off, I think, right now. So for me, it was $4.79 in the UK. Sadly, not sponsored. Would be very nice if it was. I just love this game so much that it's hard not to be like, oh, this is really good. You should get it. Obviously, if you're just playing the game for the first time, you don't need the DLC. But if you find yourself enjoying the gameplay loop, oh boy, is it worth it. Because the uniqueness of each character is just insane. And then, of course, what would any roguelike be without a massive skill tree? Now, as you can see, I'm level 74. I've put in about 30, 40 hours into this game. My skill tree is about halfway done. And that doesn't take into consideration that each hero has their own little tree on the side as well. So the main tree gets shared except for the hero section. Gunfire Reborn is just one of the best indie games I have ever stumbled across. And I don't know if it's the looter shooter aspect or the roguelike aspect or the fact that they've mashed them together so eloquently that does the trick. But oh boy, is it so good. Gunfire Reborn is a very difficult game not to recommend for anyone that enjoys roguelikes or FPS games, or even likes playing Borderlands. If you love the loot aspect of Borderlands but are sick of grinding, I don't know, the same boss over and over and over again, grind out some RNG instead. It's just as good and the characters are absolutely phenomenal. And the art style is just, I don't know how to describe it. If I'm not mistaken, it is a very heavily influenced Chinese art style, if I'm not mistaken. But the game just looks phenomenal. It's very stylized. I think that's probably why it's so fun to play. I think if it was just a regular, realistic first-person shooter, it wouldn't work nearly as well. Kind of like how with Borderlands, it has that very iconic cell shading look. Without it, Borderlands I don't think would be nearly as prominent as it is. Same with Gunfire Reborn. Without its very unique style, it would just not be the same, but because it does, it's very fun and unique. And the game is very fast, very fluid, and things can drop at a dime. And it's very reactionary based, shall we say. You always have to keep moving. I mean, you have a dash, you have a grenade, each character has a unique grenade, every character has a unique skill. There's a lot you need to do to not be terrible at the game, and sometimes you do get shafted with terrible weapons, terrible skills, and, you know, you have an awful run. But that's, to be brutally honest, that's just how roguelikes go, unfortunately. But when it comes to Gunfire Reborn, there's so little to complain about. The only thing is that the levels can get a little bit samey after a while, which is to be expected. It's a roguelike. Unfortunately, level design is never really their forte. You have procedurally generated levels that all kind of feel the same, although somewhat randomly. They're never perfect. That's how procedural generation works, unfortunately. But for the most part, you're mainly in tight corridors or slightly open areas, depending on which sort of level and stage you're on. And then at the end, you have a lovely massive boss fight to just is the ultimate DPS check. Either you kill it quicker than it kills you, or you kill it quicker than it can kill you. Basically, if you're not gearing your character up decently up until the very end, you're in for a rough time, unless you are just the best Gunfire Reborn player in the world. But I'm sure if you YouTubed something like Gunfire Reborn, hardest level, revolver, walkthrough or whatever, I'm sure you'd find someone that has beat the game using only the starting revolver. Personally, that's not something I'll be doing because that sounds like a lot of painful work, but good on them for trying. And honestly, I get it because even the revolver is fun to play. That's what I'm trying to get at, is that every just aspect of the game is so incredibly fun and enjoyable that every time I load up Gunfire Reborn, I'm never playing it and going, I wish this was over. I wish I was done. It just doesn't happen. The game is very fun. It's very enjoyable. You can play for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, half an hour, an entire day. It's up to you. You can have one run and be like, I'm good. Or you could have like 20 different runs in a row and realize that you're terrible, which admittedly, I've probably done once the game first came out. And of course, the game comes with multiplayer. You can play this game with up to 4 friends. Now, do keep in mind that when you do play in co-op, all the enemies get slightly harder. It is exceptionally fun. Admittedly, at the start of the game, it was a little buggy. Let's be honest. All games are usually at the start of early access, but the multiplayer has really sort of improved over the years, I find. In the last like year or so when I've played co-op, I've not had too many issues, but we are spanning back about a year now, so there's only so much storage my brain can memorize. But yeah, Gunfire Reborn is a game that just keeps on giving, and there's a roadmap, and the game just constantly adds more content, even if it's just a couple of little things, like a couple of new weapons and whatnot. But the more they add to it, the more sort of nuance and just enjoyment you can seep from the game, because there's just so much randomness with each run. And while the levels do feel very samey, and the characters do, you know, do lose their sparkle after a fair bit of time, you're never going to have the same run with the same weapons over and over again. Yeah, you can start off a run with, I don't know, a massive rocket launcher, but by the end of it, you may be throwing poison knives into someone's forehead for like times 20 million damage or whatever. The game is phenomenal, and I love that more DLC has been created for the game. I don't love paying for stuff. No one does. That's kind of the rule of life, unfortunately. But in terms of DLC, Gunfire Reborn definitely deserves my money, which is not something I say lightly, because I never buy DLC, because I rarely play a game and go, I want to play more of this. By the time I'm done with a game, I'm like, nah, we're done. I'm over this. But Gunfire Reborn just sort of demonstrates I'm just not done with this game. I don't know if I'll ever be done with this game. Once they stop making content, maybe then I'll be done with the game. But for now, I adore this game, and I hope whoever watches this gives it a chance, because it is just absolutely phenomenal. But yeah, that's about all I have to say on the matter. I did do a Let's Play of the game back when it sort of first came out, if I remember correctly, when I sort of first started the channel, but obviously Let's Plays aren't the done thing anymore, which is a shame, but you know, the YouTube landscape must move on. But alas, thank you for those that stuck around to the end. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and all of that good stuff. Let me know if you've played Gunfire Reborn in the comments down below. If not, you should change that, unless it's not your genre, in which case I can't really help you there, I'm afraid. Definitely give the game a go. It is a lot of fun. Let me know what you think of the DLC. I'd love to know what people think of the game, because I'll be honest, not enough people talk about this game, and that's a damn travesty. But anyway, I've been James, the Mayor of Jamestown, and until next time, goodbye.